Hey everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my channel. Today I'm going to share with you a birthday card I've created for my sister. It's her birthday coming up this month, and so I'm using the Lucky Dog stamp set from the Greeting Farm. This is so cute. I love dogs, and she has a dog, so I thought it would be a great stamp set to use for her card. So let's take a look at the supplies I used and get started. So to begin, I've cut a piece of cardstock to an A2 card size, and that's top folded. And then I'm coming in with a piece of mixed media cardstock, and this is cut to the same size as that A2 card because I want this to serve as my base for my card. I've also used a general circle template, and I've cut this out of Neenah Solar White cardstock. I'm going to use this to put my stamping elements on. And this I cut it with my Sizzix Big Shot machine. I'm also going to use this template from Simon Says Stamp. This is called Tiny Spaced Hearts, and it's a stencil. And so I will be using that with some Ranger texture paste. And so this is really nice. It kind of creates sort of like an embossed look, but it's it's almost like an icing, and it hardens. So it's really fun to work with. You can do a lot. So I can create those hearts and make them raised up on the card. And I'm going to color those in with some distress inks. So I'm going to try using Picked Raspberry, Candied Apple, and Wilted Violet. That's what I'm going to experiment with. I may change these colors, but I'm going to try those. And then, of course, this is the stamp set from the Greeting Farm, and it's called Lucky Dogs. I love this. It's so cute. I'm also going to grab a piece of parchment paper. I'm going to mix my textured paste on this because I want to try blending my distress ink colors with my textured paste to tint it. So I'm going to see how that works out. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with the background. And this is the mixed media cardstock that's cut to the same size as my main card base, that A2 size. I'm going to use Picked Raspberry of the distress inks, and I'm just using a round blender with a little foam disc. You can pick these up at Michael's or any craft store. They're also at Simon Says Stamp. You can get them online. I'll put a link in the description below. And so I'm going to color the background with my Picked Raspberry. You'll want to work in circles when you're doing this. And I find that the mixed media cardstock works the best. It blends the easiest. And I just want to do a light wash of this color. I don't want to try to enhance it or make it darker. I just want to get this color down. And I don't care about getting an even application for this because I'm just using a single color. If there's lights and dark spots, I think that adds a little more interest. So I'm not really overly concerned that there are some swirl marks that are darker than others. It almost looks like clouds this way. And I mean, if I was doing a blended gradient, I would go over that and make sure it was nice and smooth. But I don't want to add too much color. I want to keep this pink sort of light. So there's the first part. So I've set my blended background aside to dry. I need that to be completely dry before I begin putting on the stencil. So I'm going to work on my stamps now. So I have my circle cut out with my template, and I'm going to use this little doggy here, and I'm going to use the sentiment Your Possum and the little heart. Now I'm going to come in with some Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I'm going to COPIC color this. And I've already cut out my circle so that I could see the positioning and make sure that I leave enough space for all of the elements around in the space provided, that it's all evenly spaced. So I'm just going to tack this down with some Post-it tape just to keep it in place while I stamp it down. So I think I'm going to start with my little pooch here. It's always easiest, I find, if you use the biggest element first, and then that kind of grounds the scene and you can work your other smaller elements around it. Now I haven't used this stamp before, so I'm just going to stamp it on a scrap piece of paper once. I find that this helps because it sort of blots on the first impression, but then I find once I've got that first stamp out of the way, it works really well. Now I've stamped this guy, and I noticed that the lines did still come out pretty weak. Maybe I should have stamped it a few more times on a scrap piece of paper, But to fix this, I'm just going to come in with my micron pen and go over some of those thicker lines with a 01 here. And so now I'm going to do the You're a Possum sentiment, and I have used this stamp before, so it should be pretty easy to use. It shouldn't give me any trouble. Yeah, that looks awesome. It looks possum. I just thought of that as I seen it. I was like, that's actually what I said, but not in doglet speak. So I'm going to come in with my little heart too. And I actually have not used this stamp yet, so it looks like it's inking up pretty good. I'm just going to go for it. Yeah, that looks great. So now I'm just going to touch up these lines with my micron pen. I have a 01. Any size would work, I think, as long as you didn't get too big. It's the bigger lines that I want to fill in, so the 1 should be fine for that. Okay, so now I've set up my work surface to create the texture with the stencil, the heart stencil in the background. So I've taped down a little piece of parchment paper, and this is what I'm going to mix my distress inks onto and then create the color for my textured paste. And then over here I'm just using the back of my cutting mat, and I've taped down the blended background with some frog tape. Normally I would use post-it tape because it has super low adhesion, but I don't want to have any shifting happen during the process. So the frog tape or the painter's green tape, that's just what I'm using. It also comes off really easily off your work. And so I've just tacked it just to the edges, and then I have my stencil in place and it's all centered. So I'm going to begin, I'm going to smush down a little bit of this wilted violet, and then I'm going to do a touch of candied apple just to change up the color of that wilted violet a little bit, as I do want it to be more on the red side to match the pink background. I'm going to use this palette knife, and I picked up a pack of 4 of these at Michael's, and it was relatively inexpensive. I think maybe around $5. It doesn't take a lot of texture paste either. So I'm going to just mush this together. Oh, maybe I should have taped that down better. Although this is parchment paper, so it probably doesn't stick very well. This is really fun. Sometimes I see those videos on Instagram and it has the paint blobs and then people are mixing the paint together. If you ever watch those, they're like, there's something just mesmerizing about them. Call for the big guns. Okay, so this is looking really pretty. I'm going to put a little more wilted violet. I would almost like to see this darker. This is very pretty. And put a little bit more wilted violet, and again I'm going to come in with just a touch of candy apple to keep it that red color, less on the blue side. So now I'm going to start applying this, and so literally I'm just laying it down, pushing it down into the holes, making sure that there's no air bubbles and those holes get filled, and then I'm coming back and scraping the knife, the edge of the knife, just to make it flush with the top of the stencil. That'll still give a little raised heart on that background, but it'll make it all even as well. So you won't have some hearts that are taller or higher than others. But you do want to make sure that you get that paste down into those holes first and that there's no bubbles or gaps. So by doing that, you just push. I'm not pushing too hard, but just making sure that it gets worked in to each hole, and then coming back and scooping it across the top, just so that at the end they'll all be uniform and the same height. This is super easy to do, it's super quick, and it gives such a pretty effect. It really dresses up a background. In fact, I don't have a lot of stencils, but I would like to pick up some more. The nice thing about this stencil too is the holes are small, so it's really easy to make them all look great and even with minimal fuss. So just check each heart and make sure you can't see any of the background showing through. That's a surefire way to know that you've got all those air bubbles or little pockets, especially in the pointy parts of the heart. They can get missed sometimes. So you can see how much paste I have left over. It's quite a lot. A little goes a long way, so you don't need a lot. So now I'm just going to very carefully remove this stencil. Just lifting up straight should be fine. Make sure my tape's not sticking first. And then very slowly. And there's the hearts. That looks so cute. I think she's going to love this card. So I'm going to go rinse this off with some soap and water. And then we'll work on the next part. So I've set this aside to dry. I'm just going to let that sit. And I'm going to work on coloring my little COPIC little puppy. And so I picked some colors for that. So I'm going to use BG10, B21, and BG45, just super simple. I picked some BGs, blue-greens, and then I threw in a blue as well just to add a little bit of variance. I find with COPIC coloring, if you stray from the same color family, you add a little bit of a next-door neighbor, so to speak. It kind of adds a little more interest to your coloring. It doesn't seem flat. So I'll show you what I mean here. Is just on the COPIC coloring chart, everything is in columns, and so I'm just kind of going to the left or right of that. So with the BGs, I'm just kind of jumping over to the Bs and grabbing a couple or a color from there as well, just to blend it in. So let's start coloring. So I'm starting with the lightest color, and this is the BG10, and it's really light. I want to use a light color on the face so I don't lose that detail and he doesn't look too dark, so it's easy to see his little eyes and his mouth. And then I'm going to use this as sort of my highlight color. I'm going to put it on the top part of the dog and then blend out from there. I want to keep this at the top of the ear as well because that's the highlight, as if the sun points at the top. And then I'm going to come in with B21. This is baby blue. And I'm going to come up from the bottom. This is going to act more as a shadow color. And I'm just doing flicks up into that light green that we just added. And then I will blend that after. So I'm sort of doing just an easy shadow. Just the bottom is dark and the top is light around the object. And it's easy to do this with this little stamp because of the shape, the circular shape. Makes it really easy to achieve that. Just to keep that simple rule of doing light on the top and dark on the bottom. So just really blending at that line where they meet, blending out into the blue. It's always easier to blend with your lighter color because it sits well on the darker. If you tried the darker, it would be the opposite. It'd be kind of messy. But you can see how the blue at the bottom and the green on the top just adds a little more interest, and the shadow color kind of changes because it's a blue and not a blue-green, so it looks kind of neat that way. I like this look. It is hard sometimes when you're blending two different color families, though. You do have to blend a little bit more than you would if you were using, say, two BGs. You have to do a little bit more blending, but it's not too bad. And then I'm just going to get the shadow part of the curve of his tail. And now a trick I'm going to teach you here, if you can see, I'll hold it up. So if you can see, I went just a little bit out of the line there. So I'm going to come in with my colorless blender, and very easily I'm just going to wipe right up to that line. And what this does is it just pulls that color out into this puddle of colorless blender that I've created. So it blurs it out to the point where you can't see the pigment. And so that's an easy way to fix a mistake. If you go outside the line, sometimes I get COPIC happy and I just rush and that happens. So that's an easy way to fix it. I'm just going to blend a little bit here. I see some lines happening. Come in and darken his little feet and in this crease. So I'm going to color the little patches on him this darker BG. And I am doing the one eye patch. It's probably borderline for me as far as darkness goes. I wouldn't want to go too much darker than this. I just like to keep the faces light on the critters so that they're still the main focal point. When you look at someone or you look at something, you look at their face first. And you want to see that detail. So I'm going to come in with the B again and just use this as my shadow color, coming up from the bottom. And then what I have left is his nose, and so I want to pick a pink that is close to this color. And so that's going to bring in that background color. So I think, if I look at my color chart, I think I'm going to do V15 for his nose. Maybe a V12. And he is looking super cute. I think he'll be really cute on this background. So now I'm ready to assemble my card. I have this circle template that I had left over from another project. I had colored this with cracked pistachio and tumbled glass. And so I just nested 2 circles together, and I'm going to use that to dress up my little guy here. So I'm going to put it like this. And so I'm going to put the bottom circle down first. And so to do that, this is going to be a little tricky to adhere, but I'm going to use a little craft glue and just tack it around the edge. So I'm just going to smush this around with my finger. The nice thing about the stencil background is you can count, I'm counting 3 rows of hearts at the top and 3 rows at the bottom, so it makes it easy to find center. And so now I'm ready to put my little puppy in the middle. And so I'm going to use some foam tape for him, and I'm just about out. So I'll cut this up, and then I'm going to use some of these double-sided pop-up dots as well. These pop-up dots are just something I picked up at the dollar store. I was in there and seen them, and they were pretty inexpensive. Of course, they're at the dollar store. So I thought they'd just be handy to have on hand, which is great because today I've run out of foam tape, which is my staple. So I'm just going to use my X-Acto knife to hold this so that I can easily line it up and make sure it's center and straight without having my hands in the way. I find it, especially with this circle, I want to make sure it's perfect. So I'm going to come in with my tape roller and just get this tape down and put on the back of my card. And so the easiest way to line this up, I find, is if you use the folded edge, because that is the edge you can't trim if it's crooked. But it always lines up straight. And I just use the sides of my hand and just push it together. And there you have it. This is the finished card. I'm so excited about this card, and I'm really excited to give it to my sister. I think the colors look really nice together, and I really like the blues with the blue greens. And the blue and blue-green added to the circle too. I think it looks really nice. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos. Thank you so much for watching.